AITA for not giving my sister the money she asked for to start her business. 28M, have a sister, Lena, 24F, who has always been kind of impulsive and, to be honest, a bit naive when it comes to money. Growing up, she was always the dreamer in the family, constantly talking about all the things she wanted to do, but never really putting much action behind them. I'm not trying to say she's lazy, but she's one of those people who jumps from one thing to another without following through. A few months ago, Lena came to me with an idea to start a small online business. She wanted to sell handmade jewelry, which on the surface sounded like a nice idea. She had been making jewelry for a while, and while I thought her pieces were pretty, I didn't think it was something that could turn into a full-fledged business. But I didn't say anything at first. I just listened and told her I thought it was a cool hobby. She then started asking me for a loan to get things started. She had no savings, no business plan, and no real idea about how to market or sell the jewelry. I told her I wasn't sure it was a good idea, but didn't outright say no. She kept insisting that it would be a huge success and that with my help, she could turn it into something big. She didn't really have a concrete number in mind at first, but after a few weeks, she started telling me how much money she would need. The number kept changing, but eventually, it settled at $10,000. She told me it would cover all the costs, materials, website setup, branding, and some emergency fund for the first few months. She assured me that she'd pay me back within a year, maybe sooner, depending on how the business did. Now, here's where I started to get uncomfortable. Lena has a history of getting excited about things, diving in headfirst, and then losing interest when things don't go as planned. I saw her do this with a bunch of different things over the years: photography courses, graphic design courses, even trying to start a blog. She always dropped everything after a few months, and it seemed like she'd just move on to the next passion. So, giving her $10,000 seemed like a big risk, especially when she had no proven track record with business or anything remotely related. I told her I was hesitant and needed to think about it. She was really upset, but I explained that it wasn't about not wanting to help her. It was about being realistic. I told her I didn't want to lose that amount of money if the business didn't work out, especially since I wasn't convinced she'd follow through. She got upset, calling me unsupportive and saying I didn't believe in her. That stung, to be honest. I do care about her, and I wanted her to succeed, but I wasn't willing to risk that kind of money based on a whim. A couple of weeks passed, and I hadn't given her an answer. Then one night, my mom called me and told me I needed to step up and help my sister. Apparently, Lena had been crying about it, saying I didn't care about her dreams and that I was holding her back. My mom asked me to reconsider and pointed out that Lena had always been there for me when I needed her, even though I'd never asked for anything in return. I agreed that Lena had been a good sister, but I still didn't feel comfortable giving her that much money, especially given her history. I tried to explain this to my mom, but she didn't really seem to understand. Things got tense in the family. Lena kept messaging me, trying to guilt-trip me into helping her. She said that if I didn't help her, she wouldn't be able to follow her dreams, and it would be my fault if she failed. I felt like I was being manipulated, and I didn't want to give in to that. I told her I'd be willing to help in other ways, like maybe offering advice or helping her come up with a business plan, but I wasn't giving her any money. She didn't take that well at all. Eventually, Lena started posting on social media about her dreams being crushed and how she'd never get her business off the ground because her own brother didn't believe in her. Some of our extended family members started reaching out to me, asking if I was seriously not helping my sister. They said it was a small investment that could change her life, and I should at least give her a chance. I got really frustrated, but I stood my ground. About a week ago, Lena posted a picture of a new business venture that she was launching. It turns out she had raised the money from a bunch of her friends and distant relatives, most of whom barely knew her. She's already spent the money on materials and a professional photographer for her website. I'm still not sure if this will work out for her, but now she's constantly bragging about how she made it happen without me. I can't help but feel like she's rubbing it in my face, like she's trying to prove I was wrong. Now, she's been posting more and more about how successful her business is going to be, and I can't help but feel resentful. I mean, she wouldn't even have a business if it weren't for the money she raised from everyone else. But now, every time I see her talking about it, I feel like she's throwing it in my face, and I'm starting to wonder if I made the wrong choice. I don't know if I should reach out and apologize for not supporting her, or if I should just continue to stay out of it and let her figure out herself. So, AITA for not giving my sister the money she asked for to start her business? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and motivates me to create even more amazing content just for you. Make sure to turn on notifications so you'll never miss out on a new video. I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your support. It truly helps the channel grow. AITA for not forgiving my best friend after she publicly humiliated me? I, 30F, have been friends with Sarah, 30F, for about 10 years. We met in college, and we've been inseparable ever since. We have always been there for each other, through the good and bad, and we've been through a lot together. However, about 6 months ago, something happened that I'm still having trouble getting over, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm in the wrong for how I've been handling it. It all started when Sarah began dating this guy, Tom, 32M, Tom, and I never really hit it off. There was just something about him that rubbed me the wrong way, but I always try to be polite and respectful because Sarah really liked him, and I wanted her to be happy. Over time, though, I noticed some red flags about Tom that made me uncomfortable. For example, he had a habit of making comments about my appearance. He would say things like, "Wow, you look so much better than last time," or "I didn't expect you to look this good today." These comments were odd, but I chalked them up to him being socially awkward, and I didn't want to make things weird for Sarah, so I let them slide. There were other little things too, like how he would always try to one-up me in conversations or make subtle digs at my achievements. But I didn't want to cause drama, so I kept my thoughts to myself. A few months ago, Sarah and Tom hosted a small party at their place, and I was invited, as usual. I didn't really want to go, but I didn't want to seem distant, so I showed up. The night started off fine, with everyone chatting and having a good time. But then, about halfway through the evening, things took a turn. Tom had been drinking, and he started making some offhand comments that made me uncomfortable. At first, it was just silly jokes about how I wasn't quite the life of the party, but then he started getting more personal. He made a comment about how I'm always the one who tries too hard, and that maybe I should stop wearing so much makeup because it looks like I'm trying to hide something. I laughed it off at first because I didn't want to cause a scene, but Sarah didn't say anything. I figured she didn't hear it but didn't think it was a big deal. But then, as the night went on, he got worse. At one point, he loudly proclaimed that I'm kind of a loser and asked everyone in the room, including my close friends, "Do you think she even has a real job? Or is she just pretending?" I was stunned. The entire room went quiet, and I could feel my face flush with embarrassment. No one said anything, and Sarah didn't step in to defend me. She just looked uncomfortable, like she didn't know how to handle it, but she didn't do anything to stop it. At that moment, I decided I had had enough. I grabbed my things, told Sarah I was leaving, and walked out. The next day, I called Sarah to talk to her about what happened, and I was still upset. I tried to explain how hurt I felt by Tom's words, especially because I've always been a good friend to her, and I felt like she should have said something or at least talked to him about it afterward. But Sarah's response was surprising. She told me that I was overreacting and that I needed to let it go. She said that Tom was just being Tom, and that I shouldn't take everything so personally. She also said that I shouldn't expect her to always defend me because he's her boyfriend, and I should understand that she has to pick her battles. I was floored. It felt like she was completely dismissing my feelings, and it stung. I told her that I couldn't keep being friends with someone who would let her partner treat me like that. I told her that I needed space to process everything and that I didn't know if I could trust her anymore. We hung up, and I didn't hear from her for a while. Over the next couple of weeks, I tried to move on. I didn't reach out to Sarah because I felt like I had been more than patient with her, and I wasn't going to beg someone to respect me. But I did hear from other mutual friends that Sarah had been talking about what happened. Apparently, she had told people that I was being dramatic and too sensitive, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. Some friends tried to talk to me about it, but I refused to get involved. It seemed like Sarah had already made up her mind about the situation, and I wasn't going to try to change it. A month later, Sarah reached out to me, asking if we could talk. She apologized for how things had gone down, but also blamed me for not trying harder to understand her perspective. She said that I was being too black and white about everything and that no relationship is perfect. I told her that I didn't think I could keep being friends with someone who couldn't stand up for me, and I told her that I needed more than just a vague apology. I needed her to acknowledge that she let her boyfriend treat me horribly and that she didn't have my back when I needed her the most. She didn't respond to that message. That was 2 months ago, and since then, we haven't spoken. A few mutual friends have asked me if I'll ever forgive Sarah, and some of them say I'm being too hard on her, that she was just in a tough spot and didn't know how to handle it. Others say that I'm right to cut her off because no one should tolerate that kind of behavior, especially from someone who's supposed to be their best friend. I've been going back and forth in my mind about whether I made the right decision. It feels like I've lost a friend who meant a lot to me, but I don't want to go back to a friendship where I feel like I'm constantly being disrespected. I'm also starting to wonder if maybe I'm being too stubborn and not giving Sarah a chance to make things right. AITA for not forgiving my best friend after she allowed her boyfriend to humiliate me in front of everyone and didn't defend me. AITA for not letting my brother move into my house after he lost his job. I, 29F, have a brother, John, 32M, who has always been a bit of a wild card. We grew up in a pretty chaotic household, with my parents often fighting and not providing a lot of structure for us. My brother was always the one who kind of just coasted through life, never taking anything seriously and bouncing between jobs, hobbies, and relationships without much of a clear plan for the future. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. I worked hard in school, got a good job, and built a stable life for myself. John and I have always had a strained relationship. While we were close when we were younger, things changed when we became adults. I think a big part of it was the fact that he never seemed to grow up, and I started resenting him for not putting in any effort into his life. He always relied on others, including our parents, to bail him out when things went wrong. Fast forward to a few months ago, and John lost his job. He'd been working at a tech startup for a couple of years, but the company went under due to poor management, and he was left unemployed. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed he'd bounce back, like he always did. However, it's been several months, and he hasn't been able to find another job. He's still living off savings, and he keeps asking our parents for money to cover his bills. Our parents are really tired of it, and they've made it clear they don't want to help him anymore. One night, John called me and asked if he could move into my house until he found a new job. At first, I was taken aback. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I'm really protective of my space. I've worked hard for what I have, and I like having my own privacy and routine. The thought of having him here, especially for an extended period of time, stressed me out. But being the decent person that I am, I agreed to meet with him in person to discuss it. When we sat down, he explained that he was having a tough time finding work and that he needed a place to stay while he got back on his feet. He promised he wouldn't be a burden, said he'd pay rent when he got a job, and that he'd respect my space. I really wanted to help him, but I just didn't know if it was a good idea. We've never lived together as adults, and our relationship has been pretty rocky over the years. I was worried about the tension that could build up between us, and I honestly wasn't sure if he was being sincere about getting his life together. After thinking it over for a couple of days, I told John that I couldn't let him move in. I explained that I wasn't comfortable sharing my space, especially since he wasn't in a stable place mentally or financially, and I didn't want to risk things becoming tense between us. I also told him that I needed to protect my own mental health and well-being, and that I wasn't in a position to take on the responsibility of supporting him financially or emotionally. John was really upset. He said I was being selfish and that it was my job as family to help him when he needed it the most. He reminded me that I had always been the responsible one and that I should be there for him in his time of need. He also made me feel guilty by saying that he had no one else to turn to and that if I didn't help him, he might end up on the streets. I felt really bad after the conversation, but I stood my ground. I didn't want to jeopardize my own stability for the sake of enabling his behavior. A few days later, our parents called me. They had heard about the situation from John, and they were furious with me for not helping him. They said I was being too harsh and that families should always have each other's backs. They also brought up how hard it must be for John to be in such a difficult position, and that I was making it worse by refusing to let him move in. I tried to explain my side of things, but they weren't having it. They said I should be more understanding and that I was letting my personal issues with John get in the way of doing the right thing. Now, I feel like I'm stuck in the middle of the family drama. John hasn't spoken to me since our argument, and our parents are disappointed in me. I keep questioning whether I did the right thing. On one hand, I feel like I'm just looking out for myself and setting boundaries, which I think is important. But on the other hand, I can't help but feel like I failed as a sister by not stepping up when he really needed help. So, AITA for not letting my brother move into my house after he lost his job? Or should I put aside my concerns and just help him out? AITA for telling my friend I won't hang out with her anymore after she lied about my health? So here's the situation. I, 28F, have a close friend. Let's call her Jenny, 30F. We've been friends for over 10 years, and we've been through a lot together. We've had our ups and downs, but we've always worked things out in the end. However, something happened recently that made me rethink our entire friendship. About 6 months ago, I was dealing with some health issues. I had been feeling off for a while, chronic fatigue, headaches, occasional dizziness, but I didn't think it was anything major. After a couple of months of not improving, I finally decided to go to the doctor. It turns out I have a pretty serious medical condition that requires a lot of management. I don't want to go into specifics about the diagnosis because that's not the point of the story, but it's something that affects my daily life, and I have to make some changes in my lifestyle, including medication and regular doctor visits. I told Jenny about my diagnosis because she's one of my closest friends, and I felt she deserved to know. I also wanted her to understand why I might have to cancel plans or not be as available as I used to be. She was really supportive at first, saying all the right things, offering to help, and telling me I could lean on her. I really appreciated that, and it made me feel like I wasn't going through this alone. However, as the months went on, I started to notice something weird. Jenny, who's generally a pretty private person, started talking about my condition to other people. A lot. It wasn't just casual mentions. She'd go into great detail about my health problems, even things I hadn't shared with her. She'd talk about the symptoms I had, the tests I was undergoing, and even made some comments about how hard it must be for me. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was just glad people knew what I was going through, and I trusted her. But then, one day, a mutual friend mentioned something about my condition worsening in front of me, and I was shocked. I had never told this person that my condition had gotten worse. I was still in the process of figuring out treatment, but I wasn't in any kind of crisis. So I asked a mutual friend where they'd heard that from. They told me that Jenny had said it, and when I asked Jenny about it, she acted like she hadn't said anything. She just brushed it off and said she was trying to be helpful. That didn't sit right with me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Jenny was sharing details about my health with people I hadn't even told yet. And she wasn't doing it in a way that made me feel supported. She was talking about it like it was some kind of gossip, almost like she was getting some kind of validation by discussing my struggles. I decided to confront her about it. I called her and asked her why she had been telling other people about my health without my permission. She got defensive right away, saying that she was just trying to keep people in the loop and that it was no big deal. I told her that it was a big deal because my health was private and I hadn't authorized her to share that information. She apologized, but I could tell she didn't really get it. She kept saying things like, "I didn't mean to hurt you," and "I thought it was no big deal," but I didn't feel like she was taking my feelings seriously. I ended up telling her that I needed some space because I wasn't sure if I could trust her anymore. After that conversation, things got worse. Jenny started pulling away from me, and I noticed that she was hanging out with our other friends more often without inviting me. I understand that people move on or need time to adjust, but it felt intentional, like she was making me out to be the bad guy for wanting some boundaries. Then, a few weeks ago, I heard from another friend that Jenny had been telling people that I had cut her off for no reason. She was painting herself as the victim, saying that she was just trying to help me, and I was being too sensitive. That really pissed me off. I had been nothing but upfront with her, and I had only asked for basic respect regarding my privacy. But now she was spreading lies about me, making it sound like I was the one being unreasonable. I was beyond frustrated, so I decided to send her a message. In the message, I told her that I couldn't be friends with someone who didn't respect my privacy or my boundaries. I also told her that if she kept spreading lies about me, I would have to distance myself even more. I didn't want to be friends with someone who could be so careless with my personal information. She responded immediately, accusing me of being dramatic and telling me that I was overreacting about the whole situation. She said I should just get over it and stop being so uptight. I'm honestly not sure if she's gaslighting me or if she genuinely doesn't understand why I'm upset, but I felt like I had no choice but to cut ties with her. Now, everyone else in our friend group is caught in the middle. Some of them have reached out to me to say that they understand where I'm coming from, but others have told me that I should just forgive her because it's not that big of a deal. They say I'm being too harsh, and I've even heard some of them say that Jenny has been really hurt by my decision to distance myself from her. I've had a few friends imply that I'm overreacting. I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm being too sensitive. But I can't shake the feeling that I did the right thing. My health is one of the most personal and vulnerable parts of my life, and I don't think I should have to tolerate someone betraying my trust like that. On the other hand, I feel guilty because Jenny is hurt, and I'm wondering if I should have been more forgiving. AITA for cutting off my friend after she lied about my health and spread it to other people without my consent. AITA for refusing to let my brother-in-law stay with us after he insulted my family. So, I, 29F, have been married to my husband Tom, 31M, for 3 years now. We have a pretty tight-knit family, and I'm very close to my parents, especially my mom. My husband and I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, which is cozy but not huge, and we've been pretty comfortable with it. However, there's one thing that has caused some tension. My brother-in-law, James, 32M. James is Tom's older brother, and while they get along most of the time, things have been a bit tense between us since we got married. James never really seemed to like me, and it wasn't always clear why. At first, I thought it might just be jealousy or the typical sibling dynamic, but over the years, it has become more obvious that James just doesn't like me for no particular reason that I can understand. He's never been rude outright, but he has a way of making little snide comments or acting passive-aggressive around me. A few months ago, James had some trouble with his living situation. His roommate was moving out, and he needed a place to stay for a few weeks until he could find another one. Tom, being the good brother that he is, suggested that James stay with us for a little while. I wasn't thrilled about it, but Tom convinced me that it was temporary and we could make it work. I agreed, but I made it clear to Tom that we couldn't have James over for too long. Our apartment is small, and I was concerned about the tension that always seems to exist between me and him. Tom reassured me that it would only be for a couple of weeks, so I reluctantly agreed. The first few days went by relatively smoothly, although I couldn't shake the feeling that James was being extra condescending towards me. He would make comments about my cooking, the way I cleaned the apartment, or how I spent my time, all in a way that seemed to suggest that he thought he was somehow superior. For example, he once made a sarcastic remark about how impressive it was that I managed to keep the house looking so well decent considering my job. I'm a freelance writer, and I don't work 9 to 5, so apparently, to him, that meant I wasn't doing anything important. It was a small comment, but it stuck with me. One evening, I invited my parents over for dinner. It's something we do every couple of weeks, and Tom and I enjoy having them over. I thought it would be a nice way to give James a sense of what our family dynamic was like. James didn't seem particularly excited about it, but he didn't complain either. However, the night went terribly. From the moment my parents arrived, James was rude. He didn't engage much in conversation, and when he did, it was clear that he was mocking my family in subtle ways. He made fun of my dad's job, a job he's had for decades, and belittled my mom's hobby of gardening. At one point, he rolled his eyes when my mom mentioned how much she enjoyed her plants, and then he said, "Oh, great, so now we're all talking about dirt." Fun. I felt uncomfortable but didn't want to cause a scene, so I just brushed it off. My parents, being kind-hearted people, tried to make conversation with him, but he only seemed to grow more distant and aloof. The worst part came when we sat down to eat. James started making passive-aggressive remarks about the food I had prepared. It was a simple homemade lasagna with a salad, nothing too fancy, but he started picking apart every little thing. This lasagna is kind of bland, don't you think? I would have added more spices if it were me. But I guess this works if you don't care about flavor. My parents were clearly uncomfortable, and I could feel my blood boiling. Tom was trying to change the subject, but James just kept going. Finally, I had had enough. I calmly told James that if he didn't like the food, he didn't have to eat it. I wasn't going to sit there and let him insult everything I did for my family. He scoffed and said, "Wow, somebody's defensive. It's just food, relax." My mom tried to smooth things over by changing the subject, but it was clear that the evening had soured. After dinner, my parents left early, and Tom and I had a long talk about what happened. I told him I couldn't deal with James anymore. I didn't want him staying at our place any longer, especially if he was going to continue disrespecting me and my family. Tom said that he understood, but also pointed out that James was going through a tough time and that he didn't want to make things worse by kicking him out. He suggested we give James another chance, but I was done. I told Tom that I didn't want him staying with us any longer, and I would rather James figure things out on his own than have him continue staying in our apartment and ruining our peace. Tom was upset, but agreed to talk to James. The conversation didn't go well. James was furious when Tom told him he needed to leave. He called me all sorts of names, including controlling and unreasonable, and said that I was too sensitive and too insecure to handle the real world. It was a lot of insults, and he even said that I was being selfish for not letting him stay longer. When James left, Tom and I had a huge fight. He accused me of being too hard on his brother, and I told him I couldn't live in an environment where I was constantly belittled by someone who wasn't even trying to make an effort to get along. We argued for hours, but eventually we both cooled down. Tom said he understood my perspective, but he felt torn because he didn't want to be the one to make his brother homeless. It's been a few weeks since all of this happened, and things between Tom and me are still a bit strained. We've talked things through, but he's still upset about how I handled the situation with his brother. I feel like I made the right choice for my mental well-being, but I'm wondering if I overreacted by not letting James stay with us any longer. Did I go too far in refusing him? Or am I justified in putting my family's peace ahead of everything else? AITA for refusing to let my brother-in-law stay with us after he insulted my family? AITA for refusing to attend my sister's graduation after she publicly humiliated me? I, 27M, have an older sister, Emily, 30F, who's always been the golden child of our family. She's the firstborn, has always been incredibly academic, and has an almost unnatural ability to succeed in everything she does. Our parents adore her, and honestly, it's been that way for as long as I can remember. I've always felt like the underdog in comparison, not necessarily because I'm incapable, but because Emily's achievements just seem to overshadow anything I do. I don't want to sound like I'm bitter or jealous, but it's hard not to when every family gathering or event turns into another one of her accomplishments being paraded around. Despite this, I've always tried to be supportive. When she got her degree in biology, I congratulated her even though I'd dropped out of college. I wasn't as academically inclined, but I found my own path, and after a few years of trying different things, I found my passion for woodworking. It's not glamorous or celebrated in the same way, but I enjoy it, and I've been able to make a decent living out of it. Well, fast forward to a few months ago, and Emily graduated with a master's degree in something that seemed even more impressive, advanced research in neuroscience. I was proud of her, sure, but I won't lie and say that old feeling of being overshadowed didn't creep back in. She sent out invites for her graduation party, and, of course, our parents were planning to go, as expected. The problem started when I received the invitation. It wasn't just an invite to celebrate her graduation. It was a full-on event, and I was one of the few people on the guest list who wasn't expected to give a speech. Now, at first I thought, okay, that's a bit much, but I figured it was part of the celebration and her way of including everyone. I'd seen other people at events like this give short speeches, so I didn't think much of it. A few weeks before the event, I had a conversation with Emily about what kind of speech she wanted me to give. She seemed a bit hesitant at first, but then said, I guess you can talk about how proud you are of me and how you've watched me grow, stuff like that. I didn't mind this, but I was also caught off guard by how almost condescending it sounded. The stuff like that felt like she was minimizing anything I might want to say. I knew it was her big day, but I had hoped for a bit more genuine inclusion rather than a thank you for showing up vibe. At the same time, I had started thinking about the pressure this was all putting on me. Not only was I being asked to show up and make a speech at a major event, but there was also this looming feeling that no matter what I said, it would never measure up to her standards. I couldn't shake the thought that I'd be overshadowed again, this time in front of the whole family and all of her friends and colleagues. So I started doing what I tend to do when I get anxious. I withdrew a little bit. I didn't respond immediately to her requests. I started making excuses about my busy work schedule and how I wasn't sure I'd be able to attend, even though in the back of my mind, I knew I was still leaning towards not going at all. Then a week before the event, Emily texted me and asked, "Hey, I really need to know if you're going to give a speech. I've already ordered the program, and I need to finalize it." When I saw this message, I realized it was the final straw. I was already overwhelmed by everything else in my life, and the idea of attending this graduation and trying to perform for her and the rest of the family felt suffocating. I had no intention of speaking at her event, and I didn't feel like I should have to. She had made it clear that she expected me to be a part of the show, but I wasn't willing to play that role. So I texted her back, and to be honest, it wasn't the nicest response. I told her that I wasn't comfortable attending and that I didn't feel like I was in the right headspace to participate in what felt like an incredibly high-pressure event. I told her that I'd be celebrating her success in my own way, but that I couldn't be part of this event. She immediately called me, and it did not go well. She was upset, saying things like, "This is my big day, and you can't even show up for me, and you've been acting so distant lately. I thought we were close, but now it seems like you're just jealous of me." She accused me of being selfish and said that I was turning her moment into something about me. I tried to explain that it wasn't about jealousy, but more about feeling pressured and uncomfortable with the expectations being placed on me. She didn't want to hear it, though. I spoke to our parents afterward, and they were more on Emily's side. They said that I should just go to the party and support family, because that's what's expected of me. They called me childish and told me that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. Our mom even said, "You need to grow up and stop making everything about you." The thing is, I've always been the one who's been expected to suck it up and be the supportive little brother, but when the roles were reversed, it felt like I was being asked to do way more than I was comfortable with. Now, I'm in a bit of a bind. My sister is furious with me for not showing up to her graduation, and my parents are disappointed. I've been avoiding them, and honestly, I feel a bit guilty, but at the same time, I feel like I had no other option. This wasn't just about her graduation. It felt like another example of me being expected to play the supportive role while she got all the glory. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's graduation after she publicly humiliated me and tried to pressure me into a speech I didn't want to give. AITA for refusing to give my brother a large sum of money to save his business. So, here's the situation. I, 29M, have an older brother, Daniel, 33M, who started a small business about 3 years ago. It's a family-owned thing, and he's always been very passionate about it. The problem is, he's never really been good with finances, and the business has been struggling for a while now. He has poured a lot of his savings into it, but it hasn't been enough to get it off the ground. I'm not a financial expert, but I have a steady job, and over the years, I've managed to save up a decent amount. I live within my means, and I try to keep a good balance between saving for the future and living comfortably. I've been pretty responsible with my money, and I know how lucky I am to be in a solid financial situation. For the past few months, Daniel has been coming to me asking for help. He claims that if he just had a large sum of money to cover his expenses for the next year, he could turn things around. He said he's on the verge of a breakthrough, but he's running out of cash, and he just needs a little more time to make it work. The sum he's asking for is $50,000. I know that sounds like a lot, and it is, but to him, it's the last chance he believes will save the business. At first, I was hesitant. I care about my brother, and I know he's been trying hard, but it felt like a huge risk. When I asked him about the specifics of his business plan and how he intended to make that money back, he didn't have a clear answer. It was all very vague, like once things stabilize, once we land the big deal, etc. I tried to explain that I couldn't just throw that kind of money at something without a solid plan. We've had several conversations, and every time, he's gotten more desperate. He tells me he's tried everything, and he's running out of options. He says this is his dream, and if he fails, it'll break him emotionally. He's been giving me guilt trips, telling me that if I don't help, I'll regret it for the rest of my life because I could have saved him. I've talked to my partner, 31F, who's been extremely supportive of me, but she's also very practical. She thinks I should help my brother, but only if I can afford it without putting myself in a tough spot. She agrees that I should ask for more concrete details about his plan before considering lending him anything. She's worried about the potential fallout if it doesn't work out. Here's the thing, I don't have that kind of money just lying around. Sure, I've saved up a good amount, but that's for things like buying a house or securing my future. I worked really hard to get where I am, and I don't want to jeopardize my own financial stability. What if his business doesn't turn around? What if I never see that money again? It would be devastating for both of us, and honestly, I don't know if our relationship would ever be the same. I told Daniel that I couldn't give him $50,000, and I offered to help him in other ways. I suggested he look into getting a small business loan, or maybe even talk to an investor. I offered to help him put together a more solid business plan to show potential lenders. I also told him I could help him network, maybe connect him with people who might be able to help with the financial side. But I told him straight up I couldn't just hand over that much money. He was upset. He called me selfish, accused me of not caring about him or his future, and said that if I didn't help him, I would be responsible for his failure. He told me that he would never forgive me if I let him lose everything. It's been a few weeks since I turned him down, and things are still tense. I've been thinking a lot about whether I made the right decision. On one hand, I feel like I did the responsible thing. I have my own future to think about, and I can't just give away that much money on a whim. On the other hand, I do feel bad for him. He's in a tough spot, and I know this business means a lot to him. I can't help but wonder if I should have done more to support him, even if it meant taking a financial risk. So, AITA for refusing to give my brother such a large sum of money? I want to help, but I'm not sure if I'm being too harsh by drawing a line here. AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding because of how she treated me during a tough time in my life. So, I, 28F, have been best friends with Katie, 30F, since we were in high school. We've always had a really close relationship, and even though we've had our ups and downs, I've always had her back and she's always had mine. We went to the same college, supported each other through breakups, family drama, and other life challenges, and I honestly considered her like a sister. A couple of years ago, my life hit a rough patch. I went through a pretty painful breakup, which led to me dealing with some pretty serious mental health issues. I was constantly anxious, depressed, and struggling to get out of bed most days. It was one of the hardest periods of my life, and I felt incredibly alone. Katie knew what I was going through. She'd been one of the first people I confided in when the breakup happened, and I trusted her with my feelings. We used to talk about everything, so I didn't hold back. At the time, Katie was in a relationship with her now husband, Mark, 32M. They'd been together for about a year, and while I didn't know him too well at the time, I was happy that she had found someone who seemed to care about her. The problem started when I began to lean on her more than I should have during my tough time. I'd often call her or text her to talk things through, but I noticed that she became more distant. It wasn't that she was ignoring me, but she'd often tell me that she was busy or that Mark needed her attention. She started prioritizing him over me, which stung because I had always been there for her, especially when she was going through rough times with her family or when she was feeling unsure about her relationship. This went on for a while, and I felt like I was being abandoned by my best friend at a time when I needed her most. There were a few specific instances that really hurt me, like the time I had a mental breakdown and reached out to her for support. She texted me back that she was on a date night with Mark and would talk to me the next day. I understood that she wanted to have time for her relationship, but that night, I felt like I couldn't handle it alone and ended up crying on the phone with my mom. I didn't want to burden her, but I felt like she was my go-to person and I was being pushed aside. Eventually, I started pulling away. It became clear to me that I wasn't a priority anymore, and I felt like I couldn't keep trying to force something that wasn't mutual. I didn't want to make things difficult, but I also didn't want to keep reaching out to someone who wasn't there for me when I really needed them. I decided to focus on myself, went to therapy, and slowly started building a support system that didn't include her. About a year later, Katie reached out to me out of the blue. She apologized for not being there for me when I was struggling and admitted that she had been so caught up in her relationship with Mark that she neglected her friendships. She said she didn't realize how much I needed her at that time, and she was genuinely sorry for not being there when I reached out. It was an emotional conversation, and I appreciated her apology, but honestly, it didn't undo the hurt I had felt for so long. At that point, I had already started to move on and build other friendships. I wasn't the same person I was when we were best friends, and while I was willing to forgive her, I wasn't sure if I could go back to the way things were before. It took time for me to process everything, but we slowly started talking again, and it seemed like we were making progress. Now, here's where the main issue comes in. Katie and Mark are getting married. She asked me to be a bridesmaid, which I thought was strange because, frankly, I didn't feel like we were as close as we used to be. I had already started distancing myself from her and her relationship, mostly because I was still hurt by how everything had gone down. I didn't know how to feel about her getting married, and I didn't want to be part of something that I didn't fully feel connected to anymore. I told Katie that I was happy for her and Mark, but that I didn't feel comfortable being in the wedding party. I explained that I'd been hurt by how she treated me when I was at my lowest point, and while I had forgiven her, I wasn't sure that I could go back to being that close again. I told her that I still wanted to support her, but I couldn't pretend like everything was the same as it was before. Katie got really upset. She said I was being selfish and that it was hurtful for me to reject such an important role in her life. She said that she thought we were past all the drama and that this wedding was supposed to be a new chapter for our friendship. I tried to explain that it wasn't about the wedding itself, but more about how I was feeling emotionally and how I just wasn't in a place to be that involved in her life right now. After our conversation, she texted me saying that if I couldn't support her fully, then maybe it was better if we didn't talk anymore. She said that she couldn't have someone around who didn't truly care about her happiness, and that I was being unreasonable for not trying to be there for her in such an important moment. Now, I'm torn. I don't want to lose a friendship, but at the same time, I don't think I should have to force myself to participate in something that doesn't feel right. I'm still hurt by what happened in the past, and I'm not sure if I can ever go back to being as close as we once were. I feel like I've done all the emotional work on my end, but she's still stuck on the idea that I should just move on and be there for her without acknowledging how much her actions hurt me. AITA for not wanting to be in her wedding and for rejecting her request to be a bridesmaid. AITA for not letting my best friend bring her boyfriend to my birthday party. I, 28F, have been best friends with Rachel, 28F, for over 10 years. We've been through everything together, and she's basically like family to me. We've had our ups and downs over the years, but we always find a way to work through things. My birthday is coming up, and I've been planning a small celebration with a few close friends at my apartment. It's not going to be anything extravagant, just a few drinks, food, and some fun games. I wanted to keep it intimate, and I told everyone ahead of time that I was only inviting a small group, about 6 people in total. Everyone I invited knows each other well, and they're people I've known for a long time, so it's just a chill, easy vibe. When I sent out the invites, I made it clear that I was keeping it small because I wanted to keep the atmosphere laid back. I wanted to be able to talk to everyone without feeling overwhelmed by a huge crowd, and that's why I asked people to not bring plus ones. Most of my friends understood and respected this, but Rachel, who's been dating her boyfriend, Ben, 30M, for about 6 months now, asked if she could bring him. I thought about it for a moment, and I was pretty sure I had made it clear that I didn't want anyone bringing dates. I tried to be as polite as possible, but I told Rachel that I was really trying to keep the party small, and I wasn't inviting any plus ones. I didn't want anyone feeling left out or awkward, and I wanted to maintain the vibe of the party, which was comfortable and familiar. Rachel seemed a little disappointed, but didn't press the issue. She told me she understood, but she brought it up again a few days later. This time, she said, "I really think Ben would love to come, and I'd feel so much better if he could come with me. He's kind of been asking about it, and I don't want to leave him out." I told her that I understood where she was coming from, but I was firm about my decision. I explained that the whole point of the party was to keep it small and personal, and I didn't want to change the dynamic just because of one extra person. I reassured her that I loved Ben, but this was a celebration for my closest friends, and I wanted it to stay that way. Rachel didn't seem to take this well, and she said, "I get that, but I just don't understand why it's such a big deal. It's not like we're inviting a ton of people. It's just Ben. I thought you were okay with him. We've been together for 6 months now. It feels kind of weird not to include him." I could sense that she was getting upset, and it was starting to make me uncomfortable. I told her I wasn't trying to exclude Ben on purpose, but I wanted to honor the vibe I had in mind for my party. I wasn't asking for a big, formal guest list. I just want to keep it simple. I also pointed out that I didn't want her to feel awkward about choosing between Ben and the party, and I reassured her that I'd love to hang out with her and Ben another time. At this point, Rachel got really quiet, and there was a long pause before she responded. "Well, if Ben can't come, I might not come either." This really took me by surprise. I had no idea it was going to escalate like this, and I immediately started second-guessing myself. I tried to keep my cool and told her, "Rachel, I want you to come, and I don't want you to feel like you have to choose. But this is something that's important to me, and I don't want to make the party uncomfortable for anyone, including you. I've already set the tone, and I hope you can respect that." She seemed to think about it for a while and then said, "Okay, fine, but I really don't think you should have made such a big deal out of it. It's just one extra person. I feel like you're being kind of unreasonable about this, but I'll respect your decision." I felt like there was a huge tension between us after that conversation. I knew Rachel was hurt, but I also felt like she wasn't respecting my boundaries. I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. I just want to have a birthday party that felt comfortable and personal with my closest friends. A few days later, Rachel sent me a text saying that she wouldn't be able to make it to my birthday party. She said she was really disappointed and felt like I was being unfair. She added that she understood the need for a small party, but felt hurt by how I handled the situation, as if I was deliberately excluding Ben for no reason. She told me she hoped we could talk about it soon and maybe find a way to move past this. I tried to call her to explain again, but she didn't pick up. I left a voicemail saying I didn't want things to be awkward and that I still valued her friendship. I didn't hear back from her for a few days, and then I found out through a mutual friend that Rachel had been telling people that I was being selfish and inconsiderate about the whole situation. Some of our mutual friends even started reaching out to me, asking why I couldn't just let Rachel bring Ben, and saying I was being too strict about the guest list. It felt like the situation was getting out of hand, and now I'm really questioning if I made the right decision. I didn't want to upset Rachel, but I also don't think I was being unreasonable by setting boundaries for my party. I know it's just a birthday, but it was important to me to have a low-key celebration, and I didn't want to change that just to accommodate one person's request. Now, Rachel is still upset with me, and I'm not sure if I should have just let it go and allowed her to bring Ben. I feel like I was being clear and respectful, but I'm also wondering if I overreacted or if I should have just compromised. So, AITA for not letting my best friend bring her boyfriend to my birthday party? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for telling my friend I can't be her maid of honor because she keeps making everything about her. I, 28F, have a best friend, Megan, 29F, who I've known since we were kids. We've always had a very close relationship, and I've been there for her through thick and thin. Over the years, Megan has always been the more in-your-face personality, but I've never really minded because I knew that's just how she was. However, the last few months have been different. Megan recently got engaged to her fiancé, Jake, 31M, and naturally, I was beyond happy for her. I've always known how much she wanted to get married, and Jake seems like a good guy. I was honored when she asked me to be her maid of honor. I've been in a few weddings before, so I knew what to expect, but I also understood it would be a bigger commitment than simply showing up at the event. It's an important role, and I was ready to step up. But since she got engaged, things have started to shift. Megan, while still incredibly excited, has become a little overbearing, and honestly, I'm starting to feel like everything has become more about her than about celebrating her and Jake's relationship. It all started with the engagement party. I was happy to help plan it and get involved. But as soon as the invitations were sent out, Megan started obsessing over every tiny detail, even things that didn't matter. It felt like we were planning the event for months, when in reality, we could have done it in a few weeks if we hadn't been micromanaging every little thing. Then, the day of the party came, and she spent the whole time talking about herself. How perfect the ring was, how her dress was everything she'd ever wanted, how amazing Jake was, etc. Don't get me wrong, I get that it's a big deal, but it honestly felt like every conversation I had with her was interrupted with, "Isn't this just so perfect? And can you believe this is happening?" I started to feel like I wasn't really part of the planning or the excitement. It was as though I was there just to witness her perfection rather than be a part of the celebration. When I brought it up to her, she brushed it off and said, "Oh, you're just jealous because I'm the center of attention right now. Don't worry, your time will come." At first, I laughed it off. I thought it was just a phase. Maybe she was just caught up in the moment. But the thing is, it didn't stop there. Megan began to make every single event about her. For example, when we were shopping for her wedding dress, she spent hours in the store trying on dresses, and every time she came out in a new one, the attention wasn't on her beauty or the dress. Instead, it was all about how incredible she looked and how this was the most important decision of her life. The entire day felt less about me helping her pick the right dress and more about her reminding me that this day was her special moment. As time went on, I noticed more and more of this behavior. She began to make passive-aggressive comments about my own personal life, how I wasn't married yet, how I didn't seem to have it all together like she did, and how lucky I was to be able to help with her wedding because it was so important. One time, we were talking about the honeymoon, and she said, "I'm so glad Jake and I are going to be spending the next 2 weeks in Italy. You know, I think we're the first couple in our friend group to really take a honeymoon that fancy. I know you're not married yet, but just wait till you see the kind of trips I'll be taking once I'm married." I won't lie, this bothered me a lot. It wasn't just the bragging. It was the implication that I wasn't doing enough with my life, like somehow her accomplishments were more valid or worthy of praise than mine. I've always been focused on my career and other personal goals, but she started to make me feel small, like I wasn't measuring up to her standards. The final straw came when we were discussing the wedding itself. I was excited about being her maid of honor, and I thought I could help make things smoother. But Megan began to demand that I do things that made me uncomfortable. For example, she asked me to wear a dress that I absolutely hated, one that didn't flatter my body type at all. When I told her I didn't like the dress and suggested a different one, she said, "It's not about you. It's about what I want for my wedding. You're supposed to be supportive, not make it about yourself." I felt like I couldn't say anything without her shutting me down. But the worst part was when she started telling me how to behave at the wedding, what I should say, how I should act, and what kind of speech I should give. She even wrote out a draft for me, telling me what to mention, what to skip, and how to keep the speech short and sweet. I've been in her life for years, and I feel like I should have some input, but it felt like she was just scripting everything. A few days ago, I was talking to my boyfriend about how stressed I was about the whole situation. He pointed out that Megan seemed to have turned the whole wedding into a celebration of herself and her achievements, rather than focusing on the partnership and love that a wedding is supposed to symbolize. I started to realize he was right. Everything Megan does seems to circle back to her, and she's been making the entire wedding planning process more about controlling how people see her than about actually celebrating her and Jake's future together. So, I did something I've been thinking about for a while now. I called Megan and told her I couldn't be her maid of honor anymore. I said I still wanted to be there for her and support her, but I couldn't continue to be part of something that made me feel small and unimportant. I told her that I didn't feel like she appreciated the role I was trying to play, and it was becoming too much for me emotionally. She was furious. She started crying and saying that I was abandoning her during one of the most important times of her life, and that I was making it all about me instead of her. She called me selfish and said that she'd expected more from me as her best friend. She even accused me of trying to steal the spotlight because I wasn't willing to help her the way she wanted me to. I'm heartbroken that things have come to this point. I've been her friend for years, and I've always supported her through everything. But at this point, I feel like I've been putting my feelings aside for the sake of her big day, and she's taking advantage of it. I don't know if I'm being too sensitive or if I'm justified in stepping back. So, AITA for telling my best friend that I can't be her maid of honor anymore because she's made everything about her and has started making me feel unimportant. AITA for kicking my sister out of my house after she ignored my rules. I, 28M, recently had an argument with my sister, 26F, that turned into a pretty big issue, and now our relationship is very strained. I'm trying to figure out if I'm in the wrong here because I'm genuinely feeling conflicted. A little backstory. My sister and I were always close growing up, but we've had some differences as we've gotten older. She's always been a bit more carefree, impulsive, and I guess you could say irresponsible. I've always been a bit more of a planner, trying to stay organized and make sure things in my life are in order. We get along well for the most part, but there have been a few moments of tension. A few months ago, she ran into some financial trouble. She had a good job, but she had recently quit to try to find herself and travel the world. She didn't save much money before quitting, and her new freelance gigs weren't paying enough to keep her afloat. She called me one evening, crying, and said she needed help. She was having trouble making rent and was worried she might have to move back in with our parents, but she didn't want to do that. She asked if she could stay with me for a few months until she got back on her feet. I agreed to let her stay with me, but I made it very clear that she would need to follow some ground rules. I've always been a private person, and I have a pretty structured routine. I don't mind helping family, but I made it clear that she'd need to respect my space, contribute where possible, and keep things organized. The rules were simple. 1. She'd need to pay rent at a discounted rate for a few months while she got back on her feet. I told her it wouldn't be much, just enough to help me cover utilities and groceries. 2. She couldn't bring guests over without asking first. I'm not someone who enjoys random people in my space, especially if I'm not given a heads up. 3. She had to keep the house clean. I don't expect her to deep clean every day, but basic things like doing dishes, cleaning up after herself, and keeping her stuff organized were non-negotiable. 4. If she wasn't working, she had to be actively looking for a new job or freelance work. I didn't expect her to get hired overnight, but I didn't want her to just sit around and expect me to financially support her indefinitely. She agreed to all of these rules, and for the first few weeks, everything was fine. But then things started to unravel. First, she started to slack on paying rent. She would always have an excuse. She didn't get paid yet. She was waiting on a client to pay her for a freelance project. She had to pay some unexpected bill. I didn't mind being a little flexible at first, but it started to get old after a while. Every time I asked her about the rent, she'd promise to pay me the next week. Weeks would go by, and I'd get the same excuses. I kept trying to be understanding because I know she was struggling, but eventually it felt like she was taking advantage of me. Second, she started having guests over all the time without asking me. At first, it was a friend or two, which wasn't a big deal. But then it started becoming a group of people several times a week. They would hang out late into the night, blasting music and laughing loudly. I would try to be polite about it and ask her to keep the noise down, but she would act like I was being unreasonable. It got to the point where I could barely get any sleep, and I started to get frustrated. I asked her to limit her guests and to check with me before bringing anyone over, but she ignored me. The last straw came when I came home one evening to find my living room full of people I didn't know. My sister was sitting on the couch with a guy I'd never seen before, and there were about 5 of her friends hanging out. The house was a mess, dirty dishes piled up on the coffee table, half-empty wine bottles scattered around, and food all over the place. I stood there for a minute, just processing the situation, and then I asked her what was going on. She said she was having a small get-together, and I could tell she was a little tipsy. I asked her why she hadn't asked me before inviting all these people over, and she said, "Chill, it's just a few friends. It's not a big deal." I told her it was a big deal to me because I had specifically asked her to respect my space and keep the house clean. She rolled her eyes and told me I was being uptight. We went back and forth for a bit, but at that point, I had enough. I told her that I had been patient with her, but she wasn't respecting my rules, and I couldn't keep living like this. I told her she needed to pack her things and leave. She was shocked and started crying, saying I was kicking her out when she needed me the most. She said I was being cold and selfish, and I was ruining our relationship. She tried to convince me to let her stay, but I stuck to my decision. She left that night, but things have been really awkward between us since then. She's texted me a few times, asking if we could talk, but I haven't responded. I'm still upset, and I feel like she took advantage of my generosity. I've been thinking about whether I made the right decision, but honestly, I feel like I gave her more than enough chances to follow my rules. She just ignored me every time I asked her to respect them. My parents have been calling me, saying I was too harsh and that I should have been more patient. They think I should let her move back in and give her another chance. They also keep saying that she's going through a tough time and that I should be more understanding. I get that she's struggling, but at some point, she has to take responsibility for her actions. So, AITA for kicking my sister out of my house after she ignored my rules? I feel like I did what was best for me in my home, but I'm wondering if I should have been more lenient. AITA for cutting off my sister after she consistently disrespected my boundaries during a family crisis? So, this situation has been weighing on me for a while, and I'm genuinely unsure if I'm in the wrong here. I, 32F, have a younger sister, Emily, 28F, who I've always had a bit of a complicated relationship with. We've never been incredibly close, but we've always been cordial. That being said, I've always tried to be there for her when it mattered, through breakups, job changes, and other life events. But recently, I found myself questioning whether it's even worth it to maintain a relationship with her at all. Let me give you some background. A few months ago, my father, who I'm very close to, had a serious health scare. He was rushed to the hospital with what turned out to be a heart attack, and things were incredibly touch and go for a while. Naturally, I dropped everything to be with my family and support my dad through the recovery process. This meant that I was constantly on the phone with doctors, meeting with specialists, and trying to manage all the emotional stress while helping my mom take care of things at home. In the middle of this, my sister, Emily, who lives about 2 hours away, kept texting and calling me nonstop. At first, I was grateful for her support, but soon it became overwhelming. She'd send long messages with advice on what I should do, telling me what doctors to see, how to manage Dad's recovery, and even questioning the decisions I was making about his care. Some of the advice was well-meaning, but a lot of it was unsolicited and, frankly, annoying. I was already dealing with an incredibly high level of stress, and the last thing I needed was her second-guessing my decisions and making me feel like I wasn't doing enough. I tried to set boundaries. I told her that I appreciated her concern, but that I didn't need her to send me any more unsolicited advice. I explained that I was already overwhelmed and needed to focus on my dad's recovery. I even asked her to limit her messages to just checking in on how I was doing emotionally, rather than trying to tell me what to do or how to handle the situation. I thought that was a reasonable request, but it didn't seem to register with her. Instead of respecting my boundaries, she continued to bombard me with texts. She'd send long messages throughout the day, offering advice, giving me her expert opinion on my father's treatment plan, and demanding updates. If I didn't respond immediately, she would follow up with, "Hello? Are you okay?" Or, "Why aren't you answering me?" It felt suffocating. I was already exhausted from trying to balance my dad's health, my mom's emotional needs, and my own mental health. On top of that, Emily was constantly adding pressure to an already difficult situation. One day, I snapped. I had just gotten off the phone with a doctor who was giving us some grim news about my dad's recovery, and I was emotionally drained. Emily called, and when I didn't pick up, she left a voicemail asking why I wasn't answering her, followed by a text saying, "You need to stop shutting me out. I'm just trying to help." That was the breaking point for me. I called her back and calmly, but firmly, told her that I needed her to respect my boundaries. I told her that I loved her, but I couldn't keep dealing with her pressure on top of everything else. I asked her to stop calling and texting me so frequently and to give me space to handle things on my own. Her response? She got angry and accused me of pushing her away during a crisis. She said I was being too proud and too independent, and that I was making her feel like she didn't matter. She told me that she only wanted to help, but that I was too stubborn to let her. She even went as far as to say that I was taking out my stress on her and that she was just trying to be a good sister. At this point, I was so overwhelmed by the situation that I couldn't keep up with the argument. I ended the conversation as quickly as I could, saying that I needed some space. I didn't hear from her for a few days, but then she texted me saying that I had hurt her feelings and that I needed to apologize. She said that I was acting cold and dismissive, and that it was unfair of me to shut her out when she was just trying to be supportive. I didn't respond right away because, honestly, I didn't know what to say. I had already told her what I needed, and it felt like nothing I said was being heard. The next few weeks were tense. I continued to be there for my dad and my mom, but I started distancing myself from Emily. I didn't respond to her texts, and when I did, it was short and to the point. I didn't want to fight anymore, but I also didn't want to continue the dynamic where she was constantly overstepping my boundaries. I started feeling resentful of her, resentful that she couldn't just respect my wishes and give me the space I needed. I also realized that I had been compromising my own emotional health to avoid conflict with her for far too long. Eventually, Emily reached out again and demanded an explanation. She wanted to know why I was being so distant and why I hadn't apologized for shutting her out. I told her that I was done arguing, but I also told her that I felt like I couldn't have a healthy relationship with her if she couldn't respect my boundaries. I told her that during the most stressful time in my life, I needed her to support me in the way that I needed, not the way that she thought I needed. I said that I didn't want to be constantly bombarded by unsolicited advice and that I didn't want to feel like I had to justify every decision I made regarding my dad's health. I also told her that I didn't feel like I could continue the relationship in its current form because it was unhealthy for me. She hasn't responded to that message, and it's been a few weeks now. The rest of my family is aware of the situation, and some of them think I'm being too harsh on Emily, saying that she was just trying to help and that I should have been more patient with her. Others agree with me, saying that I set reasonable boundaries and that Emily should have respected them. My mom is on my side, but my dad is worried that this could permanently damage our relationship. I'm starting to feel like I made the right decision, but I'm also second-guessing myself. I don't want to lose my sister, but I also don't think I can keep dealing with her ignoring my boundaries and creating more stress in my life when I'm already at my breaking point. AITA for cutting off my sister after she repeatedly disrespected my boundaries during my dad's health crisis. AITA for refusing to give up my seat at the family table to my sister-in-law. So, here's the situation. I, 30F, have been married to my husband, Mike, 33M, for 6 years. We have a pretty close-knit family, and I generally get along with everyone. However, there's one issue that's been bothering me for a while now, and it's regarding my sister-in-law, Jess, 31F, Mike's younger sister. Jess has been with her boyfriend, Ryan, 32M, for about 2 years, and they've been spending a lot of time with our family lately. While I've never had any serious issues with her or Ryan, there's been some tension surrounding family gatherings that has recently reached a breaking point. For context, my family has a long-standing tradition of gathering for Sunday dinners. It's been going on for decades, and everyone looks forward to it. Usually, it's at my mother-in-law's house, but occasionally, we do it at someone else's home. The dinners are relaxed, no frills, just good food, lots of chatting, and catching up with everyone. We have a pretty standard seating arrangement when it comes to the dining table. My husband and I always sit at one end, my in-laws sit on the opposite end, and the other family members fill in the sides. My seat, without fail, has always been at the end of the table closest to the kitchen. The problem started a few months ago when Jess and Ryan showed up with no warning at one of our family dinners. Mike and I weren't aware they were coming, but since our family is welcoming, no one made a fuss. They had been on the outskirts of the family's gatherings for a while, and they usually stayed on the periphery, sitting on the couch or at the bar during the meals. This time, however, things were different. Jess and Ryan walked in, and as we were all sitting down to eat, Jess immediately asked if she could sit at the end of the table where I usually sit. I was caught off guard. I've sat there for as long as I can remember, and I had no intention of giving up my spot, especially without any prior discussion. I told her, I'm actually sitting here tonight. I've always sat here, so I prefer to keep it that way. Jess was taken aback, but she didn't argue. She looked at Mike, expecting him to back her up, but Mike was silent. Ryan, her boyfriend, made a comment about how the table could be rearranged so there would be no issues with seating. Jess then said, "Well, if there's no room for us, we can just leave," which felt a little dramatic to me. It wasn't like we had limited space. It was just about the seat I've always sat in. I ended up saying, "No one is asking anyone to leave, but I don't want to move." The rest of the evening was uncomfortable. Jess and Ryan sat at a different spot, but the tension lingered in the air. I could tell that Jess was upset, but I wasn't going to change my seat just to appease her. After dinner, Jess pulled me aside and said she felt like I was being selfish and territorial over a seat. She said that since Mike and I were married, I shouldn't feel so attached to the spot, and that she'd like to sit there to feel more included. I told her that it wasn't about the seat itself, but about respecting family traditions. I've sat there every week for years, and it wasn't just some random spot. It was a part of our family's routine. Jess didn't seem to understand my perspective, and she left early with Ryan, clearly upset. Mike and I didn't talk about it much after that night, but I could tell that he was a little irritated. He said that Jess had mentioned feeling like I was making a big deal out of nothing, and that I should have just let it go. He also told me that she'd been upset for a while, feeling like she wasn't a part of the family. He said that I needed to be more welcoming and not hold on so tightly to traditions that could easily be changed. I was frustrated by Mike's reaction, but I tried to let it go. However, the issue came up again at the next Sunday dinner. Jess and Ryan showed up again, and once again, just made a point to ask if she could sit at the end of the table. This time, I was even more firm. I told her, "I'm sitting here, Jess. I've been sitting here for years, and I don't think it's unreasonable to keep things as they are. We can all sit together, but I'm not moving from my seat." Jess looked visibly upset again, but she didn't press it. However, the rest of the evening was filled with subtle comments from her and Ryan. Ryan joked that I was being a little dramatic about the seat, and Jess kept commenting about how family traditions were important until they were inconvenient. At one point, she even told me that if I couldn't let go of my attachment to the seat, I might have some deeper issues with control and that I needed to relax. I've tried to explain my perspective to Mike multiple times. I'm not saying that I'm against change, but I don't think I should have to give up something that has been a part of our family's routine for years, just because Jess and Ryan want to change things. It's not about the seat itself. It's about respecting the family dynamic. Everyone has their place, and my spot at the end of the table is mine, just like how others have their spots. Mike doesn't seem to get it. He keeps telling me that I should be more accommodating and that Jess is just trying to feel more at home with the family. I get that she might feel left out, but I also feel like she's asking for too much. It's one thing to make small changes over time, but it feels like Jess is coming in and demanding that everything be adjusted to fit her preferences. The situation has put a strain on my relationship with Mike, and I feel like I'm constantly being asked to compromise in a way that doesn't feel fair. I don't think it's unreasonable to want to keep things as they are, especially when it's something that has meant a lot to me for years. But at the same time, I don't want to be seen as the person who's making a big deal out of something so small. So, AITA for refusing to give up my seat at the family table to my sister-in-law. Should I just let it go and let her have the spot? Or am I justified in wanting to keep my place at the table? AITA for telling my mom I don't want to attend family events anymore because she keeps inviting my ex? I, 26F, have a pretty complicated relationship with my mom, 53F. We've always been close, but over the past few years, things have become strained due to some of her choices, particularly when it comes to my ex-boyfriend, Alex, 28M. We broke up a year ago, and it was a messy breakup. We were together for almost 3 years, and I thought we'd get married. But Alex ended up cheating on me with someone from work, and needless to say, I was heartbroken. It took me a while to process everything and get over the betrayal, but I eventually moved on. I started dating someone else, and I thought I was finally starting to heal. The problem began when my mom started inviting Alex to family events shortly after the breakup. It wasn't like she was doing it secretly. She would talk about it openly like it was no big deal. The first time she invited him to a family dinner, I was caught off guard. She didn't ask me about it first. She just said, "Alex is coming over for dinner on Saturday. It'll be nice to catch up." I tried to keep my cool, but I wasn't comfortable with the idea. Alex and I hadn't spoken since the breakup, and the thought of sitting across from him at a dinner table felt overwhelming. When I tried to talk to my mom about it, she brushed it off. "Oh, it's not like you guys are together anymore. You should be fine. she said. I explained to her that it wasn't just about the relationship ending. It was about the way everything happened. He lied to me, betrayed my trust, and made me feel like I wasn't enough. My mom didn't seem to understand why I couldn't just let it go and be the bigger person. She argued that Alex was a nice guy and that I shouldn't hold a grudge. She also mentioned how he was really hurt by the breakup and that it would be good for him if I made peace with everything. I didn't want to cause a scene at the dinner, so I ended up going. I thought I could handle it for the sake of keeping the peace. But as soon as I walked in, Alex was sitting on the couch, looking just as comfortable as he always did. It felt like nothing had changed. He smiled at me and said, "Hey, it's been a while," like we hadn't just gone through one of the worst breakups I could imagine. The entire evening felt incredibly awkward. I barely spoke to him, and my mom kept trying to steer the conversation back to him, asking him about his work and his life after the breakup. I could tell she was trying to play matchmaker again, trying to pretend everything was normal. The situation only got worse when she started doing this repeatedly. Every time there was a family gathering, Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, she would invite Alex, and every time I would reluctantly show up, hoping it would be different. Each time, it felt like I was being pushed into a situation where I had to pretend everything was fine. My mom would tell me to stop being so dramatic and that I should just get over it. But for me, it wasn't that easy. I wasn't ready to pretend like everything was okay with someone who had hurt me so deeply. A few months ago, my mom invited me over for a family barbecue. I asked her if Alex was coming, and she said yes, without even asking if I was okay with it. I told her I wasn't comfortable with it, and she got frustrated with me. She said that it was unfair to keep holding on to the past, and that Alex had apologized and wanted to be friends again. She said that I needed to stop punishing him, and that I was the one causing tension in the family by refusing to move on. I tried to explain to her that it wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about respecting my boundaries. But again, she didn't listen. She told me I was being childish and petty. This is where I finally snapped. I told her that I didn't want to attend any more family events if Alex was going to be there. I said that I couldn't keep pretending to be okay with him being there when he was the person who had caused so much pain in my life. I told her that I had a right to feel uncomfortable and that she needed to respect my feelings. My mom was absolutely furious. She said I was being selfish and that I was ruining family events because I couldn't put my issues aside for one day. She told me that I was being petty and that I was making everything about me. She said that Alex was just trying to be a good person and that I was being cruel by shutting him out. She also said that it was time to move on and that I needed to grow up. I left her house that day feeling defeated. I love my mom, but I couldn't believe she didn't understand where I was coming from. She was so focused on making Alex feel comfortable and included that she completely ignored my feelings. I've had several more family events since then, and I've been avoiding them because I just don't feel like I can go when Alex is going to be there. Every time I try to talk to my mom about it, she says that I'm being unreasonable and that I'm overreacting. Now, my mom is giving me the silent treatment, and I feel like she's punishing me for setting a boundary. I know she wants everything to be normal again, but for me, it's not normal. I feel like my feelings are being completely invalidated, and I'm stuck between wanting to maintain my relationship with my mom and protecting myself from further hurt. So, AITA for telling my mom that I won't attend any more family events if my ex is invited. I feel like I'm being forced to choose between my family and my own mental health, and I just don't know if I'm in the wrong for standing my ground. AITA for refusing to lend my friend a large sum of money for his business idea. So, I, 27M, have this friend, Jake, 28M, who I've known since high school. We've always been pretty close, and I'd say we've supported each other through a lot. Jake has always had big dreams and is a very ambitious person. However, he has a history of starting things and then abandoning them when they don't immediately succeed. I've always been the more cautious one, balancing my life with work and saving for my future. A few months ago, Jake came to me with what he called a life-changing business idea. He's always had ideas for things he wanted to create or launch, but most of them haven't worked out. I've never been overly skeptical, but I can't say I have a ton of faith in the long-term viability of his ideas, given his past track record. Still, he's my friend, and I want to support him. Jake's idea was to launch a mobile app. It's a social platform aimed at helping people connect over shared interests in very specific niches. His pitch sounded fine, but I didn't really see how it would stand out in the already saturated app market. Still, he was passionate, and he told me that he had already secured some initial traction, got a couple of freelance developers lined up, and had done a ton of market research. He made it sound like it was just about to take off. The catch was, he needed funding to bring it to life. He said that if he could get a loan or an investment of around $40,000, he could pay his developers, cover marketing costs, and get the app off the ground in about 6 months. He asked me if I could lend him the money because he didn't feel comfortable going to banks, and he didn't have family who could help him out either. At first, I wasn't sure. $40,000 is a lot of money, and while Jake is a good friend, I've seen him start things before that never panned out. We had a long conversation about the risks, and he assured me that he had learned from his past mistakes. He said he was in a better position now and had refined the idea. He even promised that he would pay me back in full within a year, plus a little extra as a thank you for believing in him. I really wanted to help him, and I know how hard it is to get a business off the ground. But at the same time, I started to feel uneasy. It's not just the amount of money, it's the risk. What if the app doesn't succeed? What if I don't get my money back? I have a good amount saved up, but that's for things like buying a house in the near future, investing for retirement, and ensuring financial stability. I don't have any debts, and I like the peace of mind that brings. Lending him that kind of money would take a huge chunk of my savings, and even though he promised to pay me back, I know there's always a risk that he won't. I told him I needed some time to think about it. I wanted to make sure I was making the right decision and that I wasn't rushing into something because I felt pressured by his enthusiasm. After thinking it over for a couple of days, I decided to tell him that I wasn't comfortable lending him such a large sum of money. I explained that I valued our friendship, and I didn't want the financial burden to affect our relationship. I also told him that while I believed in his dreams, I wasn't in a position to take such a huge risk with my own money. I suggested that he look for other investors or maybe even crowdsource the funding. I mentioned that I could still support him in other ways, like helping him get in touch with some people I know in tech or providing advice on his pitch, but I couldn't give him the money. Jake didn't take it well. He immediately started accusing me of not believing in him and being unsupportive. He said I was being selfish and that if I really cared about him, I would help him take the leap. He told me that this was his last shot and that he wouldn't be able to get another opportunity like this. He also said that if I didn't lend him the money, he'd be forever in debt to me in a different way. He made me feel like I was turning my back on him at a time when he really needed me. At this point, I started to feel really conflicted. I've always been there for Jake, and I don't want to see him fail. But I also don't think it's my responsibility to bankroll his business venture. I understand that he's passionate about it, but at the end of the day, it's still a business, and businesses fail all the time. I didn't want to risk my own financial future for something that might not even pan out. The argument escalated when Jake began telling me that I was just like all the other corporate-minded people who never took risks and never supported entrepreneurs. He said that I was being safe while he was trying to do something big. He accused me of being afraid of change and getting stuck in my own comfortable life. I tried to explain that it wasn't about playing it safe, but about being responsible with my finances and making sure I'm not putting myself in a bad position. I haven't talked to him since. He hasn't reached out to me either, and I've been feeling the tension between us. I can't shake the feeling that I made the right choice by refusing to lend him the money. But at the same time, I can't help but feel guilty for not being the friend he expected me to be. It's hard to know whether I was too harsh or if I was being sensible. My other friends have been mixed in their opinions. Some think I did the right thing, saying that money should never come between friends and that I wasn't obligated to risk my future for Jake's idea. Others have said I could have been more supportive by at least helping him find other funding sources instead of flat out refusing. So, AITA for refusing to lend my friend $40,000 for his business idea? I don't want to lose him as a friend, but I also don't want to jeopardize my own financial stability. AITA for refusing to lend my friend money after she kept asking and didn't pay me back? So here's the situation. I, 29F, have a friend, Sarah, 30F, who I've known since college. We've always had a pretty solid friendship, Nothing too intense, but we've been through a lot together over the years, from breakups to job changes to family problems. I've always thought of her as a good friend, but recently things have started to change, and I'm not sure if I'm being too harsh or if I have every right to feel the way I do. Over the past year or so, Sarah has been going through a rough financial period. She lost her job during the pandemic, and while she's managed to find a new one, it's not as well paying, and she's been struggling to make ends meet. I get it. Times are tough, and I've been sympathetic to her situation. I've offered support, helped her with job leads, and even given her some advice on budgeting. However, she started asking me for money, which has become a regular occurrence, and that's where things started to get tricky. The first time she asked to borrow money was about 6 months ago. She said she had a medical emergency and needed $200 to cover a bill. She promised to pay me back within a month. I'm not super rich by any means, but I'm financially stable enough that I felt comfortable lending her the money, thinking that she would follow through on her promise. A month went by, and I didn't hear anything from Sarah. I reached out to ask when she would be paying me back, and she apologized, saying that things were still tight and that she couldn't afford it at the moment. She asked if I could wait a little longer, and because we're friends, I agreed. I'm not heartless, and I know life can be unpredictable, so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Another couple of months passed, and I still hadn't gotten the money back. At this point, I started feeling uncomfortable. I messaged her again, and she explained that her car broke down, and now she needed more money to fix it. She said she would pay me back when she could, but it would likely take a little longer. I wasn't thrilled about this, but I still tried to be understanding, thinking that maybe I was just being too impatient. But deep down, I started getting frustrated. Fast forward to a few months later, and she still hadn't repaid me. This time, I was getting a bit upset. It's one thing to lend money and wait a few weeks for it back, but it had been almost 6 months, and I was starting to feel like I was just being taken advantage of. Then, she came to me again, this time asking for $500 to help pay rent. She said that if she didn't pay it soon, she was going to lose her apartment, and she didn't know what she would do. I was already hesitant after the previous loan, but I wanted to help her, so I asked her when I could expect to get paid back. She said it would definitely be a priority this time, because she knew how much it meant to me. But here's where I started to draw the line. After lending her that $500, I still hadn't seen a cent of it back. She told me multiple times that she was working on it, but every time I brought it up, she'd come up with some new excuse. She claimed her hours at work got cut, that her mom was in the hospital, and that she had other urgent bills to pay. I sympathized, but I also started to feel like I was just one of many people she was borrowing money from. And let's be honest, by this point, I was getting irritated. I had given her almost $700, and I had nothing to show for it except for empty promises. A few weeks ago, she reached out again, this time asking for $300 to help her with a small emergency. She said it was for a medical procedure she couldn't afford. By this point, I was fed up. I told her that I wasn't able to lend her any more money, and I reminded her that she still owed me a significant amount. I explained that I couldn't keep giving her money if she wasn't going to repay me. She seemed taken aback and got defensive, saying that she felt like I didn't care about her anymore and that I was abandoning her when she needed me most. I didn't want to get into a huge argument, so I just told her that I'd already helped as much as I could, and I needed to prioritize my own financial security. I've been saving for a down payment on a house, and lending her money repeatedly was starting to put a strain on my own finances. At that point, she stopped talking to me for a few days, and when we did finally speak again, it was clear that she was angry. She told me that I was selfish and that I was just looking out for myself instead of helping her like a good friend should. I tried to explain that I couldn't keep enabling her, but she wasn't having it. She said that I should be there for her in her time of need, and that friends are supposed to help each other without keeping track of every penny. Now, I'm feeling really conflicted. I care about Sarah, and I want to see her succeed and get back on her feet. But at the same time, I feel like she's taking advantage of my generosity. I've always been there for her when she needed someone, but I'm starting to feel like she only reaches out to me when she wants money, and I'm tired of being used. I've also talked to a few of my other friends about it, and some agree that I should have cut her off sooner, while others think I should have been more understanding and kept helping her out. My question is AITA for refusing to lend her any more money, even though she's in a tough spot. I know that people can go through hard times, but at what point do I need to stop enabling this behavior? I don't want to lose a friendship over this, but I also can't keep giving her money if she doesn't plan on paying me back. I'm just not sure if I'm being too harsh or if I'm justified in setting this boundary. AITA for calling off my best friend's wedding after she tried to sabotage my relationship. So, this is a pretty complicated situation, and I'm really torn about whether I did the right thing. I, 27F, have been best friends with Sarah, 28F, since we were kids. We grew up together, went through school together, and have always been there for each other. We've been through a lot, both good and bad, and I always thought of Sarah as my ride or die. That's why what happened recently has been so hard to process. I've been dating my boyfriend, Mark, 30M, for almost 2 years now. We met through mutual friends and hit it off almost immediately. He's kind, funny, successful, and treats me with so much love and respect. I felt like I was really starting to build something solid with him, and honestly, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in a healthy, loving relationship. Mark and I have talked about the future. Nothing specific yet, but we've both mentioned that we can see a long-term future together. The issue started around 6 months ago when Sarah got engaged to her fiancé, James, 32M. Sarah was ecstatic about the proposal, and of course, I was happy for her. But almost immediately after, things began to feel off. I know wedding planning can be stressful, but Sarah began changing in ways I didn't expect. She became obsessed with the idea of perfecting every detail and started pushing all of us to follow her lead. Every time I spoke to her, it was about the wedding, and it was clear that she was prioritizing it above everything else. I didn't mind at first because I understand weddings can be a huge deal for some people, but then she started crossing boundaries. It started with small comments about Mark and I. She would joke about how we'd never make it, or how I should hold on tight to Mark because he seemed like the kind of guy who would leave me for someone younger or prettier. At first, I shrugged it off, thinking she was just being her usual sarcastic self. But the jokes got more frequent, and they started to sting. She made comments about how Mark was too perfect for me, and how someone like me didn't deserve him. These remarks were hurtful, but I didn't want to make a big deal of it, so I kept brushing it off. Then came the weirdest thing. One night, Sarah invited me over to her place to hang out, and she insisted that we watch a movie. I figured it would be a casual night, but instead, she turned it into an intervention. Sarah sat me down and told me that she didn't think Mark was right for me. She said she had concerns about him and that I should take a step back to make sure I wasn't getting too serious too fast. I was completely blindsided. Sarah's always been protective, but this felt off, like she was trying to undermine my relationship with Mark for some reason. She said that while Mark was a nice guy, he wasn't my type and that I could do better. When I asked her what she meant, she gave me this vague response about how people like me tend to settle for less and how I should be with someone more on my level. I tried to explain to her that I was happy with Mark, that he treated me well, and that I didn't need someone to fix me. But she kept pushing, saying that she knew me better than anyone and that I was too blind to see the truth. At that point, I started getting really uncomfortable. I had no idea why she was acting this way, and it felt like she was intentionally trying to plant seeds of doubt in my mind. She kept making comments about how you don't realize what you have until it's too late, and how you don't want to end up like me. She has had a few failed relationships, which she's always been open about. I felt like she was trying to scare me away from Mark, but I couldn't figure out why. Was she jealous? Was she upset that I was moving forward with my life while she was stuck in her own? Things didn't improve after that night. If anything, they got worse. She would subtly try to sabotage my plans with Mark. One weekend, we had a trip planned, and Sarah texted me hours before we were supposed to leave, saying she needed me to help her with something. When I explained that I couldn't cancel our plans last minute, she guilt-tripped me, saying that I was putting my boyfriend before her, and that I was choosing someone else over her when she needed me. I tried to explain that I had been there for her throughout the wedding planning process, but she seemed intent on making me feel bad about it. It didn't stop there. A few weeks ago, I found out that Sarah had been talking to some of my other friends behind my back about my relationship. She was telling them that she didn't think Mark was a good match for me and that I was too naive to see it. Some of these friends started giving me strange looks when we hung out, and I overheard one of them say to Sarah, "You're right. Maybe she doesn't realize what she has." I confronted Sarah about it, and she acted like it was no big deal, claiming she was just looking out for me. But it was clear to me that she was trying to make me doubt my relationship with Mark. After everything that had happened, I started to feel like I couldn't trust her anymore. It was like she was trying to sabotage my happiness for some reason. And finally, I hit my breaking point. A week ago, she invited me to her wedding dress fitting, and I went, hoping that maybe things had cooled down between us. But when I showed up, I was completely blindsided. She had invited Mark's ex-girlfriend, someone who had a history of trying to cause drama, and deliberately put us in the same room. The tension was palpable, and I could see that Sarah was enjoying it. It felt like a setup, and it was the final straw for me. That night, I called Sarah and told her that I couldn't be part of her wedding anymore. I told her that I didn't appreciate the way she'd been treating me and that I couldn't continue being friends with someone who was actively trying to ruin my relationship. She was furious, calling me all sorts of names, saying I was overreacting and that I didn't understand how important her wedding was to her. I told her I was sorry, but I had to prioritize my own mental health and happiness. She's been telling our mutual friends that I've betrayed her, and now everyone is picking sides. Some of our friends think I did the right thing, but others are saying I should have stuck by her and that I'm overreacting. I feel like I've lost a best friend, and I'm heartbroken, but I also feel like I was right to stand up for myself. So, AITA for calling off my best friend's wedding after she tried to sabotage my relationship. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.